So I want to say first that this talk was supposed to be about specific ways to harness AI effectively in your teaching, but I got carried away halfway through the preparation, and I decided to pivot a bit to what I felt was a more important topic, which is context. So before we talk about how to address the problem, I thought we need to put it in its proper historical context and talk about why it has become a problem. See, I think a lot of the discourse surrounding AI has mostly focused on its effects on student work, but why it's having those effects isn't getting as much coverage. So I thought that that's something that we should talk about here. So the TLDR version, the too long didn't read version, is that AI is not creating new problems in education. It's simply amplifying old problems that have always been embedded in the system. It's not an AI problem. It's not a Gen Z or a Gen Alpha problem. It's not even a uniquely Philippine problem. It's a systemic design problem. Now, just to be clear, we made this with the intention of making it the first part of a series of sessions. So today, I will focus more on adapting to AI, and then hopefully, if we do well enough, you'll allow us to invite you all again to talk about adapting with AI. So I guess the pressure is on me, the challenge accepted. So basically, I have already done the reading for you, and I hope that what I share inspires you to engage with this debate and then seek out uh, those ideas yourself. So let's begin by talking about the industrial origins of mass public education. So I think to understand why AI is such a massive headache right now in education, we really have to go back very to the very beginning, to when systems of public education first developed. Um, you've probably heard of the phrase, quote, factory design of education. You might be less familiar with its influences, like the Persian education system, like Horace Mann, F.W. Taylor, the Principle of Scientific Management, and the Committee of 10. Now, I won't be talking about each in turn, but if you have the time, you should really look them up because those are basically the reasons why the education system is the way it is today. So the education system was designed in the mold of the factory-dominated economy of the Industrial Revolution in which it came to be. The gist of it is that factories required efficiency, maximize output while reducing time and effort in the production process. So it's no accident that the education process came to resemble the same guiding principles as those factories. For example, those principles we can see in things like the categorization by age, in which each age is a different stage of learning. We see it in uniform inputs of information and skills at each level, meaning we teach each student the same things the same way on the same schedule. Students are being produced as standardized products, the standardized outputs, meaning we assess everyone according to the same standards and according to the same expectations. And the teacher is mostly the unquestioned authority as both the source of the information and the judge of student performance. Now, to be clear, this was revolutionary and very necessary in that time, not least because the general public had limited access to information and expertise. However, that means the education system was designed for a society where few were expected to engage in intellectual work, while the vast majority would become manual laborers who were mostly dependent on the expertise of others for information. The problem is society is not like that anymore. Yet we have allowed those same principles to continue to dictate the way we do things today, despite the demands and context of society changing many times ever since. And as the world changed exponentially, the education system fell further and further behind, responding mostly by rearranging the curriculum or assimilating new technologies into old information delivery methods. But the preferred delivery method, the assessments, the structure, even the physical buildings themselves, the schools, still closely resemble what they were 200 years ago. Now, let's talk about attitudes towards these paradigm shifting technologies. So, suspicious attitudes towards new technologies is nothing new. There is a long tradition throughout human history of new technologies being regarded negatively, especially those paradigm shifting technologies that required redefining traditions and values and cultural practices, behaviors, and lifestyles. We saw it happen with the internet. It happened with the television. It happened with telephones. It goes all the way back to the printing press when people were literally destroying the machines and booksellers were targets of violence. And in fact, it goes further than that. Plato tells us in his Phaedrus that Socrates denounced the invention of systems of writing as something that would introduce forgetfulness in the soul and lead people to, quote, appear to be wise instead of being truly so. Now, we know that generally younger generations are quicker to adapt and assimilate new technologies into their lives. Now, in fact, author Douglas Adams captured this idea in his description of the generational divide in attitudes towards new technology. So he wrote in his book, Salmon of Doubt, which was part of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. He wrote a set of rules for how different generations react to new technologies. So he said, the first type is that anything that is in the world when you're born is normal and ordinary and is just a natural part of the way the world works. The second is anything that's invented between when you're 15 and 35 is new and exciting and revolutionary, and you can probably get a career in it. And the third category, he says, is anything invented after you're 35 is against the natural order of things. So, umamin na yung mga type 3 dyan, like me. Okay, anyway, so that divide in perspectives explains much of the conflict surrounding AI. Students celebrate it. Most younger teachers insist we can work with it. And there's a lot of older teachers who warn against using it. But the thing is, when you read about AI across different platforms, you'll see the pendulum swing very wildly between those who warn about preserving human skills lest we become obsolete and those who also say we must embrace AI or we will become irrelevant. A nuanced perspective, of course, as it usually is lies somewhere between a total ban and full adoption. Human skills like writing and reading and thinking are obviously still essential. But at the same time, it would be a disservice to our students to ignore a technology that will likely dictate what their lives are going to look like in the future. Okay, so we now ask the question, why is AI causing such big problems in education today? The short answer is there are built-in contradictions between what we expect students to learn and how we teach in the classroom. Now, different sectors frame these as either a teacher problem or a student problem, but the reality is it is a systemic problem, still rooted in the original factory design origins of schooling, meaning we have actually designed a system that encourages precisely the behavior we are seeing from our students now that AI is available. And if you design a system to incentivize a certain behavior, don't be surprised when you see that behavior. Now, in our lifetime, or my lifetime at least, we have seen three major paradigm shifting technological advancements. The first was the internet, which democratized knowledge and automated the search for information. The second was smartphones and then social media, which led to prosumerism and participatory culture, which saw people becoming both producers and consumers, not of information, but of content. But what makes AI unique from past paradigm shifting technologies is that while past technologies reduce manual labor, AI is reducing cognitive labor. And that is the source of concern for many educators. But think about what we have been doing in education. Over the years and decades, we have spent a lot of effort in maintaining structure that would lead to a learning experience that was neat, ordered, efficient, fast, and as frictionless as possible. And this is understandable, but it still creates a contradiction because this is the opposite of what authentic learning looks like. Consider what our students' experiences in the traditional classroom look like versus what co-learning looks like for AI. Like, for example, in traditional education, tasks and lessons are usually isolated from real world experiences and contexts, except perhaps in certain special occasions. Feelings of confusion and frustration tend to be treated as negative. Opportunities for collaboration are controlled or limited. There are penalties or stigma on slow learners, struggling learners, making mistakes, even failure. There's typically not enough time to explore deeply on a single topic for students to really become invested or develop real interest in the subject matter. Uh, Engagement is structured, limited, controlled. Assessments are based on um, following instructions and procedures and memorization of facts. And in order to succeed in assessment, students will attempt to conform their answers and outputs to the teacher's expectations in pursuit of higher grades. And also, students have very limited control over their activities in school. Now, think about what AI learning is like. AI cannot experience the real world. AI doesn't experience doubt, confusion, frustration, joy. AI doesn't make connections with others. It doesn't have real relationships. AI doesn't feel emotions. It cannot develop interests or passions. AI doesn't learn the same way. It consumes and stores large databases of information and depends on algorithms, instructions, procedures to process that information. And AI has programmed responses that can be tailored to the user's expectations. And AI cannot make decisions in its own interest and well-being. I hope that you can see the parallels between those two lists. And that's the problem. We expect children to think like human beings, but we've been asking them to learn like machines. We ask our students to work fast and learn fast, to focus on making their outputs good. We ask them to take in large amounts of information and to parrot back facts and replicate procedures. This is simply not how humans learn best. The process of learning involves a lot of guessing, misconceptions, trial and error, explorations that lead to dead ends. Authentic intellectual work is slow, messy, and prone to errors. Things we tell students to avoid and which AI is designed to address. So since the system made those aspects of learning undesirable, the students learn to fear them and hate them. The bottom line is we have removed humanity out of education long before AI ever came along. We asked them to learn like machines and made them frustrated with their humanity. And when you look at it like that, it's easy to see why anyone, including us, maybe, would depend so much on AI. Now, I want to talk about thinking in the classroom. See, thinking is not easy. It is not always smooth, orderly, or linear. Not every idea is useful or even sensible. Meaningful thinking takes time. And I think I speak for many teachers when I say that one of the biggest challenges we face every year is the expectation to cover a lengthy syllabus and staying on track for scheduled exams while also developing habits of thinking and interest in a subject. Like, cue the Mission Impossible music. The schedule looms over the teacher like Damocles' sword, dictating what they can and cannot do. And more often than not, conforming to the schedule means prioritizing breadth over depth. direct instructions over discovery and inquiry, and teaching to the tests rather than encouraging creativity. The grand contradiction of the design of the system is that we want students to think and value learning, but we cannot provide the time and space for this to happen. Most teachers want to choose activities that help students discover concepts for themselves. Most teachers want to go much deeper into the concepts of a topic. How can you do that if you're expected to move along from lesson to lesson as quickly as possible? So instead, you lean on lectures and just tell them what they need to know and show them what they need to do. And in the process, do the thinking for them. But it's not just time and space that's the problem. The rewards structures are also antithetical to the goal. See, the rewards and punishment system of traditional education is built around students' experiences with friction in learning. Students who struggle the least and work fastest will finish ranked at the top of the class. Those who find themselves on the opposite end may inevitably get left behind in the interest of time, while possibly being labeled as a problem. The message is clear. Friction bad, perfection good. So it's not surprising when students' conceptions of thinking is limited to being right or wrong, because most of our responses highlight how close they are to being right or wrong. The closer to being right, the more positively framed our response. The further away, the more likely it is to elicit negative emotional responses from us. So, along with the stakes attached to grades and scores that also depend on proximity to perfection, you have stigma around being wrong. In other words, it's a stigma on being human. You can't expect people to enjoy thinking and learning while also penalizing and stigmatizing struggles and mistakes and failing, because those experiences are inseparable. Like, try watching kids outside of the restrictive classroom environment. You might find it's not true that kids are not willing to think. In fact, they're quite willing to struggle for a considerable period of time. If you give them an interesting puzzle, give them a weird challenge, chances are they'll go for it enthusiastically. You just have to assure them it's not graded. I have seen kids think hard and struggle over challenging problems and tasks as long as they know it's safe. They're willing to do it. They just won't do it if there's a risk of being penalized when they get it wrong. And that's not lazy. That's common sense. That's survival instincts. People learn best in conditions that allow them to explore and experiment, where they can fail several times over and try again without negative consequences. They learn by testing their ideas and gaining insight from seeing those ideas fail. So teaching in a world with AI requires a shift in narrative away from the right versus wrong paradigm to a learning from the process paradigm. It's not about the scores you get. It's about what you learned. It's not about being right. It's about the way you thought about it. It's not about whether you were wrong. It's how you can correct it. It's not about knowing the answers. It's whether you can explain them. It's not about being able to do what you were taught. It's about whether you can transfer the skills and concepts to a scenario you've never encountered before. The messaging is crucial. We can make AI useful if we make it less about reducing effort and more about making effort meaningful. It's about having something worth fighting for. But messaging won't be enough. The system needs to reinforce this message. If traditional reward systems remain in place, whatever we say in the classroom will always be undermined by the system. So as long as kids see the final scores as the end game, it's easy to justify any means that makes those scores easier to obtain. So we need to shift the narrative to the pursuit of learning. And that will help reframe the value of struggling as essential rather than unwanted. So allow me now to present my fantastic 4 first steps to make education human again, not a sponsor. Great movie though. So to keep education relevant in a world dominated by AI, we have to embrace the parts of learning that AI solves or cannot do. Yeah. So here are my 4 suggestions. Starting with number 1, embrace friction. You may have seen that there were 2 major studies so far released this year looking at the effects of AI on our ability to think. One was by Microsoft, the other was by MIT. And if you only read the viral headlines or social media posts, it might have confirmed your belief that AI makes people lazy thinkers. And that would have been an incomplete view. The study did show that outsourcing thinking to AI, which is called cognitive offloading, appeared to have negative effects on people's cognitive abilities. It lowered their ability to think. However, it also showed that those who used AI after thinking for themselves and writing a first draft on their own actually improved both their engagement with thinking tasks and improve their outputs. So this actually gives us a roadmap for using AI effectively. Basically, struggle first and let AI take over most of the routine maintenance tasks afterwards. Then use AI to create more meaningful struggle. So we can have AI take over those less demanding but still time-consuming parts of a task so that we can focus our efforts on the more cognitively complex tasks. So as I said earlier, it's not less effort, it's making effort more meaningful. Now, side note lang, routine is a subjective word, but it carries a lot of weight. You don't want AI to take over tasks before you have reached a level of proficiency at doing that. So when we say routine, it's something that you can do with minimal thinking. So you don't use AI to do tasks that aren't routine for you. So let me give you an example. Say you've written a draft. Afterwards, you can now use AI to check your grammar or arithmetic, something we already do. You can also ask it to point out where you can improve word choices and sentence structures. You can use it to identify gaps in reasoning and mark factual claims that need verification or citations. Then, it's at this point where we need to teach our students to make the conscious choice to engage with AI responses and not simply passively accept its suggestions. When I say engage, it means actively participate in the creation and articulation of new ideas by using AI as a debate partner instead of friendly collaborator. We can prompt AI to challenge us by asking questions that expose weaknesses in our writing, to assess considerations in relation to, say, audience, purpose, context, to evaluate the accuracy of claims and validity of arguments, and to reflect on things like ethical considerations, potential harms, hidden biases, possible consequences, and to strengthen logical structure, clarity, and coherence. So let me give you a few examples of some prompts that you can use for different types of activities. First, for logical and mathematical prompts. Say, for example, you can prompt the AI to ask you 5 questions that challenge you on a particular claim, or ask you 5 questions acting as a reviewer to expose gaps in any reasoning or argument. Okay? You can also ask AI to role play and make you explain a certain concept. Say to a 10-year-old, that's the Feynman method, if you're familiar. Or basically, you want to use AI to make you think more, to create more scenarios that force you to think and articulate your thinking even more. And you can also do this with creative tasks. For example, you're reading a book and you want to see how much you understand a certain character, like the main character. You can ask the AI to pretend to be that character. And then after you interview them, you can evaluate the responses of the AI to see how accurately the AI has portrayed the character. Or you can use AI to generate different metaphors when you're stuck for an idea. And then for the student, you can say, discuss each metaphor, each of those choices, and then justify which one you think is the best. Or for history, for example, you might consider something that's happening now, like in current events, and then ask the AI to generate a story in the future regarding that event, and then the student, in turn, can evaluate that story. So the point, again, of these exercises is to use AI as an intellectual adversary to sharpen and polish our mind by forcing us to get uncomfortable and expose our weaknesses. So these exercises are less about being right or wrong and puts more emphasis on the processes of thinking, which now brings me to talking about assessments. So assessments also need to change. And the obvious way to change them is to focus on process over the final product. Why? Because AI has the power to instantly generate outputs from a simple prompt. Hence, this calls into question the value of a single finished product as evidence of learning. But learning implies progress, and progress implies a forward movement from some lower starting point to a higher end point. So it's actually fair to raise the question of whether it was ever valid to simply look at the end product as a measure of progress. AI now is forcing us to pivot away from valuing the final product to a more accurate view of our students' progression from beginner to mastery. And an effective way to do this is to have students document their progress from their initial draft to the final product. This would include a justification for every revision they made or unmade, every unsuccessful trial, a discussion of how the final product improves upon their first draft. The point, again, is to have students track their own thinking, hence giving value to the dirty work that leads to the polished output. And if students use AI to support their work, you can include that in the documentation to include a journal of their use of AI, including, of course, the AI chat transcript itself. Now, in order for students to know what to observe, the task must unambiguously define the specific skill they are meant to develop and assess. If necessary, you can discuss that with the class. And as they document their progress, this also gives them the chance to engage in what we call metacognition, which is thinking about thinking. So to do that, we can provide them questions and prompts that they can answer, and maybe even with the assistance of AI to articulate their thoughts. So some prompts could be, I know I am learning this because, and now they discuss the evidence. Say, I changed my mind about whatever. I am now more conscious about something like whatever. Okay? So the goal there is to just get them to be more observant of the way they are thinking and learning. Now, when it comes to final grades, instead of placing the biggest weights on high stakes single take tests, some schools have already started implementing allowing students to take tests and submit required work multiple times while keeping track of the revisions. You can also do this as part of portfolio-based grading, where students compile all their work over a term and then use that to track their learning and then present this before their teacher or an evaluating committee as part of a process of negotiating the grade. So these portfolios and that task documentations are means of assessing learning not just by how close the finished product gets to a given standard, but by how far one has come from where they started. So this is both more accurate and more equitable because it meets students where they are and doesn't just impose a uniform measuring stick on every learner. So when you let students put more focus on the process of a task, this can help them feel more of a sense of ownership in their work and attach their satisfaction, not just in the final score, but in the act of creation itself. The point there is like, if you're too worried about how the final product is going to be evaluated, it's really hard to enjoy the process. So in this way, the task itself becomes its own reward. And now that brings me to my third suggestion, um, which is prioritize relationships. Speaking of ownership, we can help students see more value in the work they do by actually giving them something meaningful to work towards. One way to do this is to give them a meaningful audience, and not just you as the teacher, and not an audience that is there to judge their work, but perhaps an audience that's there to listen to them, to learn from them, and perhaps even to enjoy their work. We can give students opportunities to see their learning and their work in a more meaningful context. So you can do this by creating publications and public exhibits of their creative work. You can have them organize math or science camps in the school, or some variation of TED Talks where they would share their ideas to certain audiences. You can create a mentorship program with younger students or outreach programs to marginalized communities. You can take advantage of the internet and social media to have them publish advocacy blogs and channels, or to make online tutorial videos, or make public information or social mobilization campaigns, and perhaps documentaries that will be presented publicly. I mean, you could even really go the extra mile by having students just completely take over the class for a few days. The point, of course, is to have students work on actual issues and problems within their community and in the world. It gives them purpose. Okay. You could have them discuss and argue about certain problems amongst themselves to come up with solutions for things like disinformation, political polarization, uh, international territorial disputes, bullying, traffic, homelessness, hunger. And yes, I do mean do this even with younger kids. It's not about actually solving the problem. It's just tackling a meaningful issue while also exercising higher order thinking skills for a greater purpose than just a grade. And as part of the activity, you can even invite industry and academic experts to your exhibitions and fora to comment on their work and help them improve their ideas without necessarily being there to rate their work. The point is to learn, and for the possibility, however small, of making a small difference outside of the bubble of school. And an important part of this is it allows you to turn the prevailing classroom paradigm on its head, where the teacher is the singular authority and the students are trying to please that teacher with their work. Which actually brings me to my last suggestion, which is give students agency. Now, in the classroom, students may view the teachers as oracle, master, and judge, meaning we are the authority who tells them what they need to know, tells them what they need to do, and then tells them how well they're doing it. But we are not any of that. We are human. And our students should see that. So the key to that is simple, it's communication. Students receive information and suggestions from AI with passive acceptance because they were first conditioned to do the same with us as their teachers. So we need to reverse this. Let your students challenge you. Let them argue. Um, Teach them intellectual skepticism. But also, like, just ask how a lesson makes them feel. Ask them for feedback on your teaching. Ask them what they're struggling with. Ask them what you can help, how you can help them best. In other words, just have a human relationship with your students. We can be an authority without being authoritarian. We can take control without being controlling. In my personal opinion, professional distance is an artifact from when people justify the consequences of their decisions on people by obscuring the humanity of those who will be affected. Why shouldn't our humanity count for something? Relationships matter. Young people are more likely to open up with someone they feel safe around, or someone who understands them. Like, then not just young people, at my age of 25, I also feel that way. Besides that, people are also more likely to go the extra mile for people that they trust and who they believe care for them. So do this with your assessments too. Don't just look at written and submitted work. Talk to them. Sometimes we draw conclusions too quickly without asking the right questions. So ask them. Ask, ask, ask. And by all means, let your relationships with them affect how you teach them. Maybe it makes you work a little harder. Maybe it makes you speak to them gentler. Maybe it makes you more patient. Maybe you find out exactly how to meet their needs. Improving your relationships with your students improves the way you teach. And once you've done that, maybe go ahead and give them a choice. Like, not in a manipulative way where they end up choosing exactly what you want them to, but an honest to give goodness, give them a choice. Like free men. The traditional power structures of the classroom are an integral part of the efficiency required to run things smoothly. Teachers need to limit and control activities and conversations and work and thinking time so that no time is wasted. But if children are exhibiting curiosity, exploring on their own, developing interest, is that time really being wasted? Have we considered, in the interest of quote, not wasting time, that we might end up wasting opportunities? Like, what's it actually like when you learn something new and you find yourself really interested in it? Like, you get absorbed and you lose track of time. Is covering the syllabus really more important than children developing a sense of value in learning that's fueled by a sense of wonder in the world? Like, maybe every now and then just throw caution to the wind. Ignore the lesson plan and the schedule and let children's interests dictate what happens in the classroom. I like tell you, the most magical moments I have ever had in my classrooms always happened after the lesson had completely gone off topic and the conversations turned to something that wasn't scripted. Humans improvise. We're not dictated by algorithms. So take that detour. Take the scenic route. Let the train go off the rails once in a while. Talk about time travel. Talk about their favorite things. Talk about bananas. Talk about why some infinities are bigger than other infinities. Magic can't happen unless you let a little madness and chaos in. So let them in. Let it happen. And maybe in the process, you discover that these aren't the indifferent, lazy, and titled generation they were advertised to be. The kids with the empty eyes, the programmed robots waiting to do your bidding, that was just the result of years of being silenced, desensitized, and anesthetized by a system slowly training the humanity out of them. Education didn't do that. Schooling did. So that's my final thoughts here. The challenge for teachers can be summarized like this. What does it mean to teach children today for a future where they will likely always have an AI-powered smartphone in their pockets? The uncomfortable truth here is that AI is still developing faster than even the brightest minds anticipated. We are teachers from a different time, preparing students of the present for a future that lies beyond our imagination. We are being asked to time travel. But no matter what happens tomorrow, we will still be human. I mean, unless the singularity happens, but I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Making learning human means a shift away from an emphasis on efficiency, speed, perfection, to the values of struggle, of messy thinking, of human relationships, and individual agency. It's not about making AI more human. It's about taking advantage of AI to give ourselves permission to embrace our humanity. Now, recently, EdCon 2, Secretary Angara and Senator Bam Aquino have been leading some of our officials in laying out plans towards reforming the education system. This is very important work. They have made important steps towards addressing deficiencies in our infrastructure, equipment, resources, funding, accessibility, nutrition. My only concern from reading the past two annual reports is whether they are still reforming towards a pre-pandemic, pre-AI paradigm. And unless we also change what we are doing inside the classroom with the goal of more than just raising our PISA scores, those changes may not be enough. There's a chance that we're too focused on thinking about how to do things better and not thinking enough about doing better things. Fortunately, reforming the classroom does not require us to wait for legislation. Insofar as you have control over your classrooms, you can make important steps to help prepare your students to live and stay relevant in a world that will likely be dominated by AI. Someone said, a teacher is someone who makes themselves progressively unnecessary. The danger of AI is overdependence, disguised in the allure of ease and illusion of freedom. We should make it our mission to free our children from those shackles by reminding them of the value, even the joy, of the humanity that AI tells them they can escape. So, if you want to teach in a world that will be dominated by AI, let the children be human again. Thank you very much.